Alright, Amazing Spider-Man 2. Now, first off, I'm going to tell you guys the first part of this video is going to be strictly my review of the film. There aren't going to be any spoilers. The most spoilers you'll get are little details that were clearly shown in trailers, so they hardly count as spoilers. But I will let you guys know when I'm going to start getting to spoilers, and then that's what the second portion of this video is going to be. Things that happen in the story, what I hope to see for the next couple of films, and little hints and stuff that they dropped in there that I would rather let you guys see for yourselves in the film. But if you're going to comment on the second portion of this video as far as spoilers and stuff, all you have to do is put spoiler alert. That will help save people a ton of trouble from finding out all sorts of things in the film. So please do that. Just all caps spoiler alert. Just do it. Just put it twice and then hit enter like 3 times. That way they couldn't possibly read it by mistake. You have to see spoiler alert. So please put that if you're gonna comment on any of the stuff that actually happens in the film that would spoil anything for anyone who hasn't actually seen it. But this first portion, strictly spoiler free, just my thoughts on the film, what I liked, what I didn't like, and just whether or not you should see it. Now, when I went to see this movie, which I was fortunate enough to go see at midnight, I wasn't even expecting that, but I ended up going to see it at midnight. I loved the film. First off, it was great. You should go see it. That's all. That's just first off, you should go see it because it's a good movie. Even if you hated the first one, which I know a lot of people didn't like it too much because there was stuff about him taking his mask off and just the story as a whole, a lot of people just didn't like. I remember leaving the theater and there was actually a woman behind me and we were talking, or she was talking, and this is when I went to see the second film. She was talking about how she didn't like the first one. She was like, the first movie was a complete waste of my time. And I thought that was so funny because I was like, I actually love that movie. I won't say I loved it, but I thought it was really good. It was cool to see this reimagining of Spider-Man. He had the different suit. He was really, really funny. Like in the other trilogy that we have by Sam Raimi, he was funny, but he wasn't exactly Spider-Man funny. He didn't make nearly as many jokes as we get in the first and second film of this franchise. And that was one of the greatest things about these movies that I loved from the very beginning. He is incredibly sarcastic, like he really is in the comic books. And that's what makes him so cool as Spider-Man. That's one of the big things, at least. But I thought that was a good movie, and she just mentioned how it was a complete waste of her time and how she hated it and stuff. But she did say how she did like this movie. So if you did hate the first movie, you thought it was a complete waste of your time and it just wasted your life, you should still see the second one because you at least have the backstory and you can continue on into this film, which without a doubt, as much as I like the first one, this one is like a million times better. It is really one of those films where it's like the first one was good, at least to me, because like I said, a ton of people hated it. But the first one was good. The second one just blew the first one away in like every aspect. You'll kind of hate the first film. Once you see the second one, it'll be like meh. Second one is just so amazing. But I thought it was a great film. I thought the first one was good. Then I went into this, and it was just really well done. And it was way better than I was expecting it to be. I thought this is going to be a great movie. It's going to have good action. It's going to have good CG just because it's a feature film. They tend to. Although some movies do have bad CG. But it was great CG, great storytelling. It was better than I even thought. There was a lot more going on than just he's dealing with the Green Goblin or dealing with Rhino or Electro. And it was just really well done how they blended the characters together. And I thought that was really cool. The story with Gwen Stacy and being in there was actually really well done. They even put in some stuff about his parents that carries over from the first film. And one of the things they do is that we get to see more of his parents. And they have scenes from the first one, like when he goes into his dad's office and he sees everything's messed up. We actually see what his dad's doing at that point in time. And I thought that was kind of cool because I love those type of things where we see sort of the other end of the scene in a way, and we see what the other characters are doing before they came into the scene. So it was kind of cool to have that and have this little story and have Peter find out certain things about his parents. And it actually led to a little secret that was actually really, really cool to me, at least, that was revealed about his parents and about him himself, which was a nice little tie-in. But it was a great movie, and like I said, the CG and stuff. I think that was one of the big complaints about the first one is how the lizard was totally CG, and he kind of had to be because of the character himself. I don't think there's really any version of the lizard, animated or real, that could possibly be done, or I guess I should say animated, that could possibly be done without CG, unless it was just a guy in a rubber suit like Godzilla or something crazy like that. But he kind of had to be CG. But a lot of people, I think that was one of the big complaints, was that he just looked weird because he was just fully CG, and Spider-Man was just fighting a CG character, which he basically does in this one too. But Electro Electro CG compared to the lizard CG is so different. It's unbelievable. Like, there's electricity going off. Jamie Foxx himself, when he's done up in CG, looks really really cool. You can sort of see through him, and sometimes when he gets angry, he changes colors. Almost, he almost turns red on the inside, and you can like see his veins and stuff. And he looks really really cool. And there are portions where it's like CG on him, but he's actually there. So he's just kind of covered. I would assume he was covered in blue paint. I can't tell you the actual specifics, but I think they sort of just did him up in the blue paint, or it was possibly green paint, so it was actually CG all over him. And then they put all the effects on him and stuff, but you can tell it's actually Jamie Foxx in the scene. It's not like CG Jamie Foxx talking or anything. It's really him there. So he looks really cool throughout the film, and even when he is completely CG, because he gets to sort of his final form, so to say, he looks really well done. He's shooting through electricity, and he can basically turn himself just into a bolt of lightning and stuff, and travel through things. It just looks really cool. It's like his body just dematerializes down to its core, and you sort of see that. Like, they don't show like organs or anything like that, but there's a scene where he goes into an outlet, and it's like his full body's there, and then he just reaches his hand out, and he just turns into like electricity, and it goes all the way down to like just the little stems within his body, and it just looks really really cool like that. But the CG for him was really really well done, and the fight scenes were really good. There's a lot of actual Spidey sense stuff going on in this movie, which I really loved. I don't think we had that too much in the first one, but in this there are a couple of scenes where it's like Peter's talking, or it's when he's not even Spider-Man, he's just talking with the character, and then it's like, something's going on somewhere, like something just happened, something's wrong, and his Spidey senses are going off. And then there are parts where he's in fights, and it's like, I can sense everything around me, and it's almost, there's a huge open space. It actually happens in Times Square, but he's in Times Square, and there's this huge fight going on with Electro, and it just slows everything down to his Spidey senses, and I think he was basically in midair. He like dodged something, and he was in midair while he was sort of seeing everything happening at one time. And they had like electricity going through the ground and going up metal, and there were people running around about to touch stuff that they shouldn't touch because it would kill them. And he's looking around, or he's not even looking around. He's sensing everything, and we get to see the camera pan, and it shows everyone in danger. It shows all these different things blowing up and stuff, and it was just really really cool to see that. And I just loved how that was done, and it looked realistic. It wasn't too CG where the people looked super fake or anything like that. It was just really really well done. And it seems like it's a really simple thing to say, like the CG just looks good in a movie. Sometimes CG just doesn't, and there are reviews on that all over the place, where a feature film will have bad CG, and you notice it on TV all the time too, where some things are just like, why does, like, you can just see how fake it looks. It wasn't bad like that in this movie. It was really really well done. And even when stuff was completely CG, whether it was a person, whether it was Spider-Man or anything, it just looked really good, because of course Spider-Man in general in this film is CG for the most part, because that's just how he is in every film, because you just can't film a guy swinging from a skyscraper in New York City. That just doesn't happen. He's CG. But all the CG parts of Spider-Man looked really good. It didn't look weird or anything like that. It looked very fluid. It looked normal, and it was just really cool to see. And there were parts, and one of the big things about this movie before it even came out was how his suit changed from the first film. And I remember thinking I didn't want it to change either, because his suit in the first Amazing Spider-Man was really really cool, and it was also very unique because it obviously had the style of the original costume, but excuse me, it looked slightly different. Like the colors sort of ran differently than they do in the normal costume, and I think the blue was darker and the red was a little bit darker too. And then this one, it's the more typical costume, and I didn't want that just because of how unique his suit looked in the first one. But in this movie, I didn't even think about that because it was months ago when that happened. And when I was watching it, I wasn't thinking like, oh yeah, this is a different suit. It just looked good. There were still things that were different. Like one of the a really weird thing to point out is that we actually see his feet a lot in this movie because he's doing the flips and stuff. And in the very first scene of the film, there's just him skydiving basically, and you can see, and this is another thing with the CG, you can see just ripples in his suit because his suit isn't just sticking to his body, it's like regular clothes. If you bend a certain way, there's more space than there would be if if you bent back, there's more space if you bent forward. And so he's skydiving basically, and you can like hear the ripples, and that's how they do the sound effects, and you can see them, and like they show his feet and they show his arms, so you see his web shooters a lot, which is one of the big things where it's actually web shooters compared to the old trilogy where they just made it where he could actually shoot webs. And so he has the actual web shooters, and you see those a lot in the film. And it's cool that they show the details in his suit because it's a big part of Spider-Man. It's a big part of any superhero is how the suit looks and the specific little intricate details of the suit. And they show us that a lot in this movie, and I love that about it. So it was a lot of cool details. I didn't even think about the fact that his suit was different because I just forgot. But if I looked at it now, I'd probably still enjoy the first one more just because of how unique it looked. And honestly, the biggest thing about it was the fact that it had like the super long spider on the back, and it just looked really cool compared to the original Spider-Man spider that we've seen for decades. It was just a different style, and he still has that. It just looks slightly different. And like I said, I didn't even think about the fact that the suit was different in this movie. And if that was a big thing for you, you'll still enjoy the suit because it's Spider-Man. They aren't gonna make the suit look stupid, and I promise you, it does not. So even if you really love that first suit, you'll like this one too because it is him becoming Spider-Man in a sense. That first movie was him starting off. This is him as Spider-Man. He's been doing it for a while. So he's changed his outfit. He's become the Amazing Spider-Man. So it sort of goes in line with the actual story. He has developed as a character, and he changed his suit to reflect that. He's not the same little kid he used to be, who was, even though he's still the Joker of superheroes, he's still that funny, sarcastic character. He's grown a lot as Spider-Man. Like Peter Parker has grown, but so has Spider-Man. So his suit has changed to reflect that, and that was really cool. But Andrew Garfield as Peter Parker / Spider-Man, definitely really good in this movie and the last movie. It was one of the greatest things about it is the fact that him being so sarcastic was really true to the comic books, and that's what I loved about The Amazing Spider-Man 1 as well as this one. He makes so many jokes that they just weren't done in the old trilogy. Like, he was sarcastic, but it just wasn't done nearly as much as it is in this one, and I actually love that because it's so much closer to who Spider-Man is when he's actually fighting people. He calls people names and stuff, and he's about to get attacked, and if he gets hit, he could die, and he makes a joke before that, and it's just like, that's really Spider-Man. He makes the good jokes, or even if they aren't good jokes, it's just corny stuff, and that's what Spider-Man does because it gets under the skin of his enemies, although most of the time his jokes really are funny, and it's just good to watch. It's like cool action, and then they have their little dialogue between Spider-Man and whoever, and he makes just a funny joke, and it's really funny before it goes right back to the fighting, and he has to dodge something that could just obliterate him. So it's really cool to get that in the film as well. But aside from just Spider-Man being really well written, everything about this movie was really well done. One thing that was really interesting to me is they talk about how there are 3 villains in this film. It's going to be Electro, Green Goblin, and Rhino. Rhino's hardly in this film. He's honestly in it for like a minute. So, that just, I don't know. That's sort of a spoiler, but honestly, it's such a small portion of it. It's better that you actually hear that going into the film than you go into the film and expect it. He's hardly in that movie at all. It's really just him on the poster, or him even being mentioned as a character in this film. They should have just left that out as a secret because they hardly have him in it, and he's only in it really to set up the next film which will be about the Sinister Six and stuff. Which they had that in the very first film, and they mentioned that even before this one came out, they have this franchise set up to 4 movies plus a spinoff for Venom. So they already had that set up, and everyone pretty much knew exactly what the movie was going to be about, or at least the third movie, not this one, but everybody knew the third film was going to be Sinister Six, and that's exactly what they do with Rhino. He's just there, like he's actually in the beginning, Paul Giamatti, and he's not Rhino in that scene. He's Rhino in a different portion of the movie, and that's about it. He's just in it like a tiny bit of the movie as Rhino, but at least he's in it. I mean, I would have rather been like, oh, that's a cool little surprise, and then that's it. But they like made this whole big deal about it, like him as Rhino. He's not really a part of this movie. It's more like a special guest appearance by the Rhino, if anything. He's not like a huge portion of it at all, but he's in it at least. So he's in it like they said he is, but not nearly as much as they made it seem, as if it was going to be like sort of the Spider-Man 3 from the old trilogy, where it's like we have 3 villains. It's not. It's nothing like that really. It's more like it's just Electro, because Electro is the main villain, and then Green Goblin is in it a little bit as well. So it's not nearly as packed as they make it seem in this movie, or as they made it seem before the movie actually came out. But how they do it is still really well done, even if it's not done how you might expect it to be. The people that are in it, particularly Electro and Green Goblin, they're done perfectly. The characters are introduced really well, and they develop as villains unbelievably well. Like, I love how the characters develop, and how in certain parts the characters realize, like, hey, as bad guys, we kind of have to bond together, because that's the only way we're gonna get through this. And that sort of leads me to Electro as a character in this film was without a doubt the best part of it. Like, Jamie Foxx being this guy, and you probably saw it in the trailers a million times. He plays this nerdy character before he becomes Electro, and it's just like, he's not even an everyday guy. He's an invisible guy almost. Like, no one really knows him. He gets saved by Spider-Man once, and after that day, he just looks up to Spider-Man like crazy. He becomes crazy about him. He has like, what is it? Like a collage of pictures, and then he puts like a little mirror so that he can stand in the mirror. And then there's just a bunch of pictures and stuff with Spider-Man next to him, and he's like talking to himself in a different voice to be Spider-Man. And he's really crazy. He's obsessed with Spider-Man, but he's obsessed because Spider-Man saw him and he paid attention to him. And so does Gwen. Like, they actually meet at one point, and he introduces himself and she introduces herself. And then she leaves that scene and she's like, all right, it was nice to meet you. And she actually says his name. And it was like, they talked for like a minute, and he was just blown away that she remembered his name when he said it to her like a minute ago. And it was so sad to see that as a character, but it was just, that's why it was so good to see that character become a villain, because all he wanted to do was be known. And even when he was a villain, the first thing that started off was like, they're in Times Square, and this is, like I said, the tiniest spoilers, so don't worry. He has all these cameras on him because obviously this guy with electric powers is in Times Square just messing things up, not on purpose, but he turns into Electro, so he kind of hungers for electricity. And he has all the cameras on him and stuff, and he just sees all the TVs around him, and it's just him, and everyone's like silent and filming him, and he's like, you guys can see me, like, it's me on television, like, people across the world almost can see me right now. And then his powers sort of get out of control, and then it sort of switches to Spider-Man because he has to save somebody, and then it's like he sort of loses it after that because all the attention is put on Spider-Man, and now not only is he just nobody, but he's a hated nobody, and it just makes him more of a villain. And that's why I loved his character so much in this movie, because it was just well written. He just wanted to be recognized, and then he was seen as a bad guy. And that recognition, I initially thought he'd be recognized for that, and he would be like, that's kind of cool, at least I'm recognized. But he didn't even feel that way. It was like, he didn't just want to be recognized. He was like, I want to be recognized, but I want people to like me when they recognize me. And so it was like, he wasn't just starved for attention, he was starved for like want. He wanted people to want him. and it was just really really cool to see that character develop. And he went through that through the entire film. He never changed to like, I just want to be bad now. He wanted to be seen, and he wanted to be wanted by other people, and he stayed that way from human to Electro to like the final form that he went through in the end of this movie. And that was just really well written. And he even bonds with Harry Osborn in this film, and it's because of that same thing. And Harry Osborn, who comes in, I love the way that he was introduced as well, because he comes in to see his father and stuff, and his father's typically his father is Green Goblin, and then it's always like Norman Green Goblin, Harry Hobgoblin. But in this, it was like, they, I guess it was sort of like, that we've already done the typical Green Goblin thing where it's always Norman, so Norman's not really a part of it. He's in the movie, but it's mostly about his son who has finally come back, and we find out all this crazy stuff going on with him. And so he's trying to figure out, how do I get Spider-Man's blood? Like, he's trying to get something so that he's trying to do something with Spider-Man's blood. And eventually that leads him to just hating Spider-Man, because things go down, things don't work out like you want them to. And Spider-Man has to go off and do stuff sometimes. So things don't work out perfectly for all the characters in this movie. And that eventually leads him to becoming the Green Goblin. And before he becomes that, he goes through this crazy cycle of just being an evil character where he's working with Electro, and they team up to do some illegal things. I won't get into details, but excuse me. They team up, and then after that, he's already evil as his human self, basically. And then he becomes the Green Goblin, and it just makes him worse. It drives him insane, just like the typical character goes. He's already sort of lost it because things aren't going his way. And then he goes crazy because when he actually becomes the Green Goblin, he's not thinking logically. So he becomes the Green Goblin, and once again, his character has been developing down this path very, very naturally throughout the entire film, and it's just really, really well done. And obviously, like I said, I don't want to spoil anything, so I can't get into the details, but just like with Electro, everything just progresses so naturally, and they stay the same characters they are, even though they technically become different physically and mentally. They are still the same characters in some way. And it's just really well done, and that carries throughout the entire film leading up to the ending, which I love. The ending is really good. Obviously, I won't get to that into the spoiler stuff, but overall, this film is without a doubt worth seeing. It's definitely, out of all the Spider-Man films, including obviously the old trilogy, I'd have to say this probably was my favorite, because it was just so well done. It was done in a way that I was not expecting at all. The characters are just, it's natural progression. It's as if they were introduced, because the film is actually really long. It was sort of as if they were introduced in like a normal TV show, so they've had the time to develop, but they just cram it all into this one film, and they do it really well. We get to learn these characters, and they pass through time, so we see the advancement of the characters, and it's like, okay, they became this after a certain amount of time, and this is why they're like this now, and this is why they become like this later. And it's just really cool to see that. And even with Gwen Stacy and Peter and them carrying on from the first film, when it's like, do we get together or not, that carries on as well in this movie, and it's still really well done. But overall, definitely check out Amazing Spider-Man 2, because you will not regret it. And definitely look forward to Amazing Spider-Man 3. Hopefully the Venom spinoff, I'm sure the third movie is going to do really good, especially since this one was done so well. I'm not sure. I think it just came out, I think it was maybe this Friday. I already forgot, that's sad. But hopefully it'll be really good for the box office weekend, and we'll have to see. I'm sure it'll do well, but they're gonna make their third film and get a ton of money with 6 villains. We'll have to see how that plays out, but definitely go see the second one at least and wait for the third. Now, this is where I'm gonna be talking about all my spoilers and all that stuff. So if you're here right now, I've done my review. Please go see the film if you haven't, or thanks for watching so far, and I'm about to get into some spoiler stuff. Now, the first thing I want to mention, and this isn't even anything important to this actual film, and it was something I had no idea about in this movie. That is Felicia Hardy. She was put in this film. They didn't say her last name. They just said, "Hey, you're Felicia." Felicia Hardy, for anyone who does not know, is Black Cat, and she is my favorite like female comic book character in Marvel and DC. She is my favorite because for one, she's an incredibly hot looking character, and two, she's an amazingly devious character. And for anyone who isn't big on Marvel or knows a ton of characters, but you're really big into DC, she's one of the characters who has a very clear DC counterpart, and that is Catwoman. So Catwoman and Black Cat, that should give you some ideas. She's that character for Spider-Man. And it's just like with Catwoman, she's the character who is typically bad. She's a thief, but she always ends up with Spider-Man in some way. They always get real close, but it's never final. It's just like that. And I don't remember who actually played her, who the actress was, but I like the choice. I think she's cute. She has the long hair, so that helps, unless that was fake hair, because I don't know. I don't do hair much. But that could have just been a fake long wig anyway. But she'll get the fake white wig with long hair, and I'm curious to see if she has a big role in the third film. She's introduced in this film. She's obviously the only person that Harry actually talks to because he's, if you saw it already, or if not, then you're about to find out. He's sitting on that board of members, and everyone's just in their suits. They're the typical lawyers. And so he kind of looks over and he's like, "Hey, what's your name?" And she's just like, "Felicia." And when I was in the movie, a couple of people were like, "Oh," like there was a little whispers here and there. And I was just like, yes, that's all I needed to see. I could have left the movie and be like, perfect, it's excellent, she's in it, that's all I need. But I was really happy to see that she's been introduced in this film, and she's in it only in a couple of scenes, and the point is simply to introduce her character so that fans know, hey, we're thinking ahead, not just in the Sinister Six, but as far as these certain characters, we're gonna put in Black Cat. And I cannot wait to see how her story does advance, because I don't know if she's gonna still be with Oscorp or if she's gonna be off doing her own thing before she becomes Black Cat. But I'm really hoping that she is Black Cat within this next film. And one of the big things that speaks to as to whether or not she's actually gonna be in the film is the fact that at the end of the movie, time progresses. I believe it was an entire year. If I was counting right, they basically went through all the seasons and it started all over again in, I guess it would be summer or spring. But they went through an entire year at the end of the film, and that has 365 days. That's a lot of time for someone to become a villain or to become a superhero or for anything, because as you know, it technically only takes a day for one crazy thing to happen. So she's had her year to do whatever she's going to do after Harry went to prison, and the Oscorp is either falling apart or it's still going because someone else took over, and it could be her, although I highly doubt it, because I don't think that's her storyline. I don't think that's ever been her storyline where she just rose to the top of Oscorp. But she's had a year, so I'm really hopeful, because it would be easy to believe that after that year that happened, she's had time to figure out what she's going to do and decide, I'm going to be a thief, like an excellent thief too. So I'm really excited to see her be in the next film, even if it's just like a little thing like with how they did with Rhino, but hopefully done better. Even if it's like that and she's only in it for a little bit, that would really give me hope as to whether or not she's going to be in the franchise throughout, however many films they actually end up doing. But I was so happy when I saw that. I was just like, I know she's not going to be Black Cat in this movie. They didn't even say her last name, so it's just like, it was obviously just a nod to the fans, like, hey, here you go. Here's Black Cat. She's going to be somewhere in this franchise. Here you go. So that's my first little thing. Can't wait to see her in action, because that should be really well done. And like I said, I really hope she's in the next movie, because she's had enough time to decide what she's going to become. But that was a great little nod. It's one of the few nods in this movie. I only saw two. There are probably a lot more. Well, I guess technically there are four, but two of them were the Sinister Six things where they had like the Doc Ock arms and the Vulture thing. They had that in one of the trailers, and everybody knew that was going to happen. So it was like, when that trailer was announced, that was a huge thing. Like, holy crap, they're putting that in the movie, so we know it's gonna be Sinister Six for Amazing Spider-Man 3. But after that happened, it was like, well, there they are again, because I already watched the trailer a bunch and got excited. So it was just like, oh, that's cool that they're right there. But um, having the villains in there, like, I just can't wait to see how things are gonna turn out for her character and how things are gonna be as far as that little nod goes. And then the other one is Venom, who is gonna be in his own film that was already announced before the movie came out, like I said. But in the scene before Harry, or like when Harry finds out what the little cube does and how to work it on the little computer table, there was a thing where it was like a huge list of stuff happening, and one of the things that actually just I instantly saw, it said Venom containment. So that could easily be Venom as an actual like Spider Venom or something, because it's technically called the symbiote. But they could have put that in there, like I said, as a nod. And considering he is getting his own film, I'd love to see that be put into the end of this third film, because that would be amazing. All I want to see is just Venom done right. Everyone who saw Spider-Man 3 knows that Venom wasn't really well done in this movie. It wasn't exactly that. It wasn't just like, hey, Topher Grace didn't do a good job. Topher Grace did a great job because Topher Grace is a good actor. He just technically wasn't the right actor. Like, I love him for just the movies I've seen him in, as well as that 70s show. So I like Topher Grace, but Topher Grace doesn't have the physique or even the look of Eddie Brock. And it's particularly the physique. Like, his face, he's a fictional character. You could just get a good actor to play him who's buff, and it's like, meh. Like, he looks different in every cartoon. He can look different as a human. So that's not really the big deal. It's mostly the fact that Topher Grace was a skinny guy. He's not huge and big, and Venom didn't really look super amazing either. And that was one of the big things, because they didn't do the symbiote Spider-Man suit as they did in the cartoons, where it was like just jet black with the white spider and the patches, which just looks amazing. They just did a black version of the Spider-Man costume, which still looks pretty cool, but not as cool as the original thing. So when Venom comes out, it's just him in like a bigger version of the Spider-Man suit, and he does look just as gross and stuff in certain scenes, but it just wasn't done insanely well. That's just how it was. It just wasn't done perfectly. And also that probably does contribute to the fact that there were also other villains in Spider-Man 3, so it'll be cool to see him have his own film, even if he's not actually fighting Spider-Man, which I feel like he would have to be. But that was a little thing I noticed in there as well. They said like Venom containment or Venom capsule or whatever. So that's a little nod that they have. I was hoping that they would go across that in one of the scenes where he was where they were kind of scrolling across the Doc Ock arms and stuff. I was hoping like there would be something that said like symbiote or Venom or something like that, and that would have been amazing to see. But we didn't get that. It was just a little tiny selected tab that Norman could have chosen. But can't wait to see Venom come out in this too. But one of the biggest things about it is, of course, that the Sinister Six is all Spider-Man 3 is going to be about. We got Rhino at the end of this movie. I wish he was in the beginning. I mean, it makes sense as far as the story went. It does make perfect sense that he wasn't Rhino in the beginning of the movie. But at the same time, in the comics, I'm pretty sure he was Rhino before he was a part of the Sinister Six. He didn't get his stuff from them. He became Rhino. He fell into the suit or however it happened, and it grafted to him. And he was Rhino. That was it. He was just terrorizing people. He was Rhino. And that's not how it went. It was just Paul Giamatti as this gangster guy in this car. He was ramming through stuff like Rhino typically would. So I got the symbolism there. Like, he was just taking that huge truck and just destroying cars and pushing them out of the way as he would as Rhino. I got that. And then the end of the movie, it's like, oh, there's Rhino. I know they're not going to show this fight, so I'm not exactly excited. Looks cool. He has missiles. He's got machine guns. And I was just kind of disappointed, because I knew as soon as he hits him with this manhole cover, the movie's going to go off. But I'm going to be excited to see him in the movie. I still wish so much that he was just Rhino in the beginning of this. And they could have easily done that. They, like, all the time they spent with him just as a human, They could have done that with him as Rhino. Even if it was that fast and he beat him really quickly, I still would have loved that a million times more because it would have been Rhino in a Rhino suit and he would have dodged and did this and that, beat him within. I think that first scene was probably 5 or so minutes long. That would have been the perfect amount of time. Like, here's Rhino, he was beaten in 5 minutes. Then they go through the main story, and then it's like the mysterious guy in the hat talking to Harry, and then they're like, yeah, this guy who goes by the Rhino or whatever, we broke him out and we let him do his thing again, and maybe he gets an upgraded suit, and that would have been the suit at the end or whatever. But I wish that's how they did that, but we didn't get to see it that way. But at least we do know officially, I guess, I don't know, the Sinister Six is going to be in Spider-Man 3, and I can't wait to see that. And I'm really curious to see who they get to play Vulture and Doc Ock. And I'm curious to see as to who the final member of the team is, because we have basically all the characters already. Electro was in this movie, he's going to be in it again. We got Rhino, of course, at the end. We got the Green Goblin. They showed the Doc Ock arms and the Vulture wings, so that makes 5 right there. The guy in the hat could be the 6th. Like, I remember one comment I read was that he might be Mysterio, which I'd love to see just because him along with Vulture as well as Rhino, we haven't really seen in the movie show. We didn't get them in the old trilogy, so it'll be cool to see them in this new one. But I would also love to see if, I don't know how they would really implement it. Maybe they would just find some people, but Craven at one point, much like in any comic book, any group of people always changes. Excuse me. But the Sinister Six, I do believe, is typically Doc Ock, Vulture, Electro, Rhino, Sandman is one of them, and then Vulture. I believe that is the initial Sinister Six. That's like the original thing. And I don't know if they're gonna do Sandman again, even though it's been fairly close because it would only be 3 movies since the Spider-Man 3 film. But at the same time, it doesn't really matter if they do reincarnate this character because they're putting Doc Ock in it, who they kind of have to, because he's one of the few people who is always in the Sinister Six. Because typically he's the one who is the guy who sets everything up. So that's who the guy could be. He could actually be Doc Ock, and then we still get to wait and see who the 6th character is in the 3rd film, and that's when they get introduced. And I'm very curious to see how things go about for that film, introducing the villains, because of course we have Electro, Green Goblin, Rhino, and then whoever's in the hat, if that is Doc Ock. And that does leave 2 other characters. That leaves, like, who are we going to choose to fill the Vulture wingsuit, and who's the 6th villain in general, because it could be Sandman, it could be Craven, it could be pretty much just any random Spider-Man villain they want it to be, because they could change it up however they want to. But I'm just curious to see how they're going to implement this and how they're going to go about just attacking Peter as Spider-Man and as Peter Parker, especially since Harry knows who Peter is. But excited for that too. And then I cannot wait to see how things go between Peter and Harry once Harry gets out, because of course Harry killed Gwen Stacy in this film, or technically Peter did. It was a lot like the comics, and that was when I saw that scene happen. Going into the movie, I'll say this: I wanted her to die because it would have been the perfect part of the film. It would have made the film exactly what it needed to be. It would have been just like the comics. It would have been Peter suffering because of him being Spider-Man. It would have been him losing the one person that he loved the most. Him wanting, well, I don't know if I can really say that because he has his aunt, but the person that he knew was in danger even more so than his aunt, because he was with her more than his aunt outside of his home. He knew that she was in danger, and it was just like that in the comics. And he goes through, he's trying to help his best friend who's dying and becoming this weird thing. And it was so cool, like some of the stuff they did, like Peter finding out that the reason he became Spider-Man really is because his father actually put the DNA into the spiders. He put his own DNA in there. And I love that scene where he says, the only way that this could possibly work is if it's me. And then he actually says, my bloodline, without me or my bloodline, these spiders can't do anything. And I was like, well, that's how he's Spider-Man. That's why it worked for him. And it wouldn't work for Harry. So now we actually have proof if Harry tried this, it might not kill him, and it most likely wouldn't because he wasn't Green Goblin at the time. But it's not exactly going to help. And then Harry unfortunately has to find that out for himself, and it was just well done. And then he gets into the suit that basically saves his life, and there we have Green Goblin, and he's on the glider, he's in the suit and everything, and it was just really really cool. And I loved his character. God, I'm trying to think of the guy, Dane DeHaan, I believe his name is. He did Green Goblin as well as being Harry Osborn. He was calm and collected in the beginning. He kind of hated that one lawyer guy who was trying to basically have his father deemed incompetent so that he could rule Oscorp, which he tried to do as well for covering up the death of Electro when he was Max Dillon. And I like that guy being like he's like an antagonist to an antagonist, so he kind of led Harry down an even darker path because he was already dying. He already knew, like his father told him everything he knew. He was like, it started at your age, and he had the shaking hand thing, and he had the sort of scales growing on his neck, and it was like he was already going down a crappy path where he's dying. His father couldn't figure it out. He's trying to. He'd been turned down by Spider-Man, who wouldn't let him use his blood because Peter knew it could kill this guy. I don't know. It might save my best friend. It could kill my best friend, and I can't take the chance that it could kill him. And so he's led down that dark path already. He's dying. And then this guy tries to cover up Max's death and has him kicked out of his own company, his own father's company. And then that leads him to Electro. And I thought that was just so well written where he gets kicked out. He goes and finds Electro. And then they team up together. And the scene where they actually kill the guy, I thought that was like one of the best scenes in the movie because Dane DeHaan being like the crazy evil Harry Osborn was just really good. Like Electro knocks the guy out, and then he goes, he picks up the gun. Electro wakes the guy back up, and he's like, bonus round and stuff. I thought that was just an amazing scene, and it was just cool to see Harry become this crazy evil character. And then he was the Green Goblin, and then when he found out that Peter was Spider-Man, I love that scene too because he saw Gwen and he looked at her and he had like the look on his face where you could tell he was figuring things out, and he was just like, huh. And he's like, I get it. And he understood everything. He knew why it happened. And I was just like, this might end it. And he takes Gwen up. He lets her go. It seems fine. They sort of play around with it where it's like he saves her, then she drops a little, he grabs the rope, he shoots another rope, and he saves her again. He knocks Harry out, so it seemed like it was gonna be fine. And then she falls, and he's going after it. I initially thought like, oh, they're not gonna do it. I was a little disappointed. I was like, oh, she'll be fine. Like they're not gonna really do it. And then as it went longer, when it went into the whole super slow motion thing where the web actually went, which I actually loved how at first I was like, it seemed a little campy that it would look like a hand a little bit, and then I thought like, no, it just looks that way because that's what a web looks like. It just expands like a hand. And then I was like, she's not gonna make it, and sure enough, she didn't. And they didn't do it where it was like it snapped and it caught her and she sort of went back to her and it snapped her spine because that's how she died in the comic books, I believe. But she hit her head, and you heard it, and it was just like, she's done. She hit her head just before she hit the ground, and it was just like, boom. And everybody in the movie was just like, everybody was just surprised that it happened. I was just like, as soon as I saw it, it was like, that's exactly what this movie needed. Like, it was perfect. It was sad that it happened because it sucks to just see a completely innocent character get killed off. But that's what makes the story good, and that's what made this movie so incredibly perfect. Like, there are other great scenes, but honestly, if she hadn't died in this film, I just would have been disappointed. Like, I would have expected her to die in the third one, but I think that was a part of the main story, at least the original one, is that she died long before the Sinister Six even came along. And certainly would have made it way easier, but it wouldn't have been nearly as dramatic if it was like Spider-Man goes up against the Sinister Six. It would have been more like torture because they would have just like pushed her off a building or something, which still would have been a crazy scene. But this was a lot more impactful for viewers as well as the characters particularly Spider-Man, who's the only one there. But it wasn't just like he's in the middle of this crazy action scene and she dies, and he has to still beat up all these people to get to his girlfriend. It was just him. Like, the Green Goblin had already been knocked out. He wasn't fighting against him or anything like that. He was just, all he was doing was trying to catch her, and he still failed. And she died in his arms. Well, she died when she hit her head, but she was dead, and there was nothing he could do. And it was just an incredibly powerful scene. It was probably the best scene in the film. Just all of that together, it was just like, this will lead to an amazing third film and an amazing development for his character, which he already went through his stage of grief, which took an entire year because he felt responsible, and it led to him sort of watching her valedictorian speech at the end. And I thought that was a really good scene too, where the entire speech was her actually talking to him. And I thought that's a really cool way to do it, because they skipped over when she actually did it. And I thought it's because it's just a valedictorian speech, like, hey, we're here, we're going to college and stuff. And they show like the end of it when he's swinging in and changing, but we hear the beginning of it where she says stuff like you and I, or we have to do this and stuff like that. We have to stick together. You could tell she made that speech for Peter as Spider-Man. So it was just really, really well done. And then he picks himself back up and he goes out to become Spider-Man again. And then we're in the third film, but I cannot wait to see how things play out. Thought the death was handled really well. It was well written. Characters were well written. The violence in it, the little bit that there was, like extreme violence at least, well done. It wasn't super bloodied over the top because it's Spider-Man, so it won't be. But like, they did kill that one guy. He, like, Electro. Well, I thought he killed him. He sort of killed him, but restarted his heart. But it was just well done, and I just can't wait for this third film. So that's it for me. My super long review / spoiler video. Comment below, let me know what you guys saw of this film, your favorite parts, your least favorite parts, and without a doubt, tell me, what do you guys want to see in this third film? Who do you guys want the sixth person to be? Because like I said, we have Doc Ock, Vulture, Green Goblin, Electro, and this mysterious guy could be one of the Sinister Six. So who do you guys think he is, and also who do you guys want this sixth character to be? Comment below, let me know. And thank you for watching if you did this far, but for anyone who didn't watch this far, I'm still gonna say it. Thanks for watching.